going to do a little large format, long exposure. Try to catch some of that golden light. So basically, I grew up with both my parents shooting film, all my family members shooting film. I mean, pretty much everybody had a 35mm point and shoot laying around. My mom had a Pentax K1000 that to this day is still like the very first camera I ever picked up and held as a kid. You know, we grew up with her shooting that, basically, you know, family trips, vacations, stuff like that, memorable moments, Kodak moments as they would call them. And then once I moved out, my mom ended up giving me that Pentax K1000. I shot quite a few rolls through it when I first moved out of you know, friends and parties and all that sort of stuff. And one thing that really stuck with me was, you know, back then I wasn't, you know, developing or scanning or anything myself, so you just take it to Walgreens or whatever the local lab was, and getting prints back. I still have those prints in a shoebox, and it really made me realize the archivability of film and how long it can last for. Where, for instance, you know, I've gone through, I don't know, 5 cell phones in the past 10 years and have lost numerous images that were important to me that were on those cell phones just because the cell phone got dunked in a river, or you know, maybe I wasn't on top of file management as well as I should have been with that. I've actually never owned a digital camera other than my cell phone. I used to do a lot of digital video work where, you know, I shot a lot of snowboarding and skateboarding and made a lot of videos in like the action sports realm. But I was never too into stills for whatever reason. I was way more into video for like the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, something like that. And then about 3 years ago, I picked up that K1000 again because I had it in my early 20s and it got knocked off of a bedpost, and like the camera hit the ground, film popped out of the back, and for whatever reason I just thought that it was broke, and being the tank that it is, it wasn't broke. So yeah, I started shooting that, and then that led me into getting a Holga, just because I wanted something that I could go on snowboard trips with and just have to play around with, where like the image quality like looked cool, but I didn't really have to mess around with settings too much, and it wasn't something that would take me away from my video work too much. And then that just kind of led me down the rabbit hole of you know, getting into many different cameras and size formats, and now here I am today, you know, shooting large format 4x5. So I guess with film, I mean, first of all, I really like the look of it. I like the organic nature and the organic qualities of it. I believe it's something that digital just can't really replicate. I enjoy the challenge of it. I enjoy the fact that you can screw up, where it seems like with the most digital setups these days, like it's pretty hard to take a bad image, or to take an image that isn't at least salvageable in Lightroom. I think if you're really trying to shoot photographs seriously as an artist, I think there's really something to be said about choosing the look that you're going to want your images to look like beforehand. So one thing that I think is awesome about the different film cameras is they all have different looks, and they all have different eases of accessibility, which make you shoot completely different. With 35mm, you can be a lot more spontaneous. When you're shooting a larger format camera, like say a 4x5 camera for instance, it makes you become a lot more methodical about your compositions and your subject matter and the way you shoot, and you can't really be quick. One thing I really enjoy about street photography is the challenge. It's very difficult to shoot people that you don't know. I like the feeling of tension and anxiety that it brings. I feel like a lot of times when things are too easy, they don't really have a whole lot of meaning or don't feel like a worthwhile endeavor to do. Where with street photography, you also never really know what's going to be around the next corner. I mean, you might go out and shoot for a couple hours and not see a single interesting thing, and you might go out for a couple hours and blast through a few rolls. It's definitely that feeling of unknown is one thing that keeps drawing me back day after day. Even, you know, shooting the same locations or the same areas, I find that over time it definitely, you would think it gets easier, but it doesn't get easier. It gets harder because you start taking less easy shots and you start really honing your style a little bit more and focusing on what you want to portray and how you see the world, and mostly how you see human beings and the human race. I feel like doing street photography has definitely made me a more compassionate person, especially towards those less unfortunate, because you're just out in the streets every day seeing real life confronted in your face. I think one kind of misconception with street photography, a lot of people, they see my images or other people's images and they think the whole purpose of it is to make fun of other people or make fun of those who you're shooting. And I feel like that's completely wrong. I feel like, I mean, anyone that I shoot on the street and take an image of, that image is ultimately a reflection of myself and how I see the world. I think one thing that's very important for any photographer, whether their skill level is a beginner or an expert, I think one of the most important things that they can do is to be able to recognize what's a good image, no matter what kind of genre the imagery that they're looking at is. I think it's important to get out and make a lot of images and just shoot instinctively. Shoot what you like to see, shoot something that speaks to you, and once you start building that body of work, later on down the line you can find elements that correlate to each other, or maybe two images that would look great next to each other on either side of the page, where it's not something that happens in a day or a week or a month even. I think just as with film photography, how it teaches you patience, I think working on a project, patience is extremely important. You know, for a good 10, 15 years there, it was kind of the dark ages of film. You know, there was a lot of, you know, people with funny hashtags, you know, film's not dead, all that sort of thing. But I mean, if you look at it, it's like film never really died. There's always been people who are shooting film. There's more and more kids than ever who are picking up film cameras. And I think it's an amazing era we live in. I mean, you know, you can shoot film, you can shoot digital, you have all of these different tools at your fingertips to make the creative imagery that you want to. Just the older I get, the more I like to make things by hand. I feel like I spent the majority of my 20s doing most of my creative endeavors with the computer. And there's something very awesome to be said about a handmade image that you've made by hand, as opposed to just hitting, you know, the print button. I think it is, you know, very easy to make a decent looking darkroom print, but it's near impossible to make a perfect darkroom print exactly how you want. And all of that trial and error involved in the process is really something gratifying and something that I enjoy. It really feels like you are making a piece of art as opposed to just pressing a button. I think everybody should shoot film if the images they're creating are something that they want to hold on to for longer than a few years. At least in my own life, I found that digital is just not archival, is kind of one of the main things I would tell people to shoot. It saddens me when I see you know, parents and every photo that they have of their children is on a cell phone, and I mean, most of them maybe aren't that great at file management or putting their images on the cloud or on, you know, multiple hard drives that will all eventually crash, or that you won't be able to plug into your newest computer without some sort of dongle or something else. I'm Adam Ruzzamenti, and I shoot film.